Are high-interest credit cards or personal loans weighing you down? Unlock gives homeowners a smarter option. With a home equity agreement, you can tap into your home's equity for cash today. There are no monthly payments. Here's how it works. Unlock provides funds upfront and in exchange shares in a portion of your home's future value. That means you keep control with the flexibility to use your equity your way. Pay off bills, invest in home improvements, or set aside savings for peace of mind. For thousands of homeowners, Unlock has been the key to moving forward without the pressure of another payment. Put your equity to work for you. Visit unlock.com to learn more about a home equity agreement. That's unlock.com to learn more.
Terms and conditions apply. Not all homeowners will qualify. Not available in all states. Actor Portrayal. Home equity agreements are offered by Unlock Home Equity Solutions, Inc. In certain states, NMLS number 2657081. Visit www.consumeraccess.org for more info.
Typically, a ghostwriter is someone who writes content, books, articles, speeches, songs, for another person who is officially credited as the author. The ghostwriter usually stays anonymous or is not publicly acknowledged. A celebrity might hire a ghostwriter to write their autobiography, and only the celebrity's name appears on the cover. The term ghost is not literal. However, in the case of Javier Antonio, it was. Francisco Candido Antonio, better known as Javier Antonio, a spiritual medium and prolific author from Brazil who was famous for more than just his writing talent. Javier wasn't your average writer. He claimed his inspiration came not from muses of the living sort, but rather from the spirits of deceased poets, novelists, and brilliant literary minds. Not only did he allegedly channel these spirits, he took dictation from them and produced over 450 books written by the mouths of the dead. But in 1944, his ghostly writing took a spooky turn in the courtroom. Enter Humberto de Cortez, a poet who, by all accounts, had stayed dead since 1934. Despite this, Antonio claimed that de Cortez had dictated a new literary work to him from beyond the grave. The book, Brazil, Blood of the World, House of the Gospel, was published, but not without raising a few eyebrows and some legal challenges. The widow of Humberto de Cortez wasn't exactly thrilled about her late husband's posthumous literature, so displeased, in fact, that she launched a full-blown lawsuit against Javier Antonio. The case centered around an unusual question. If Javier Antonio was channeling the spirit of a deceased poet to write this book, who should receive the royalties? The widow argued that since the work was attributed to her late husband, even if he was allegedly communicating from the great beyond, his estate should be entitled to a share of the earnings. Imagine this: a courtroom filled with lawyers, a skeptical judge, an author claiming to be the vessel for a long-dead poet, and the ghost of Humberto de Cortez looming over the proceedings. This lawsuit wasn't just about money. It was a debate on the nature of authorship itself, asking whether a spirit could hold intellectual property rights. The Brazilian courts were faced with a decision they'd likely never anticipated having to make. Can a spirit be considered an author? And do its heirs have any claim to royalties? The court ultimately ruled in favor of Javier Antonio. Ghosts aren't known for leaving paper trails, so they decided that there was no concrete evidence proving that Humberto de Cortez had indeed authored the work from beyond the grave. The widow de Cortez's claim to Antonio's royalties was ruled invalid. The lawsuit didn't stop Javier Antonio. In fact, it only seemed to fuel his prolific career as a medium and writer. His books continued to sell by the millions, and his reputation as a man who communicated with the dead only grew stronger. Meanwhile, the de Cortés family had to accept that while Humberto may still be writing from beyond, there's no money to be found in a dead man's words. It's a tale that challenges the boundaries of what we consider reality, creativity, and ownership. At its core, the case serves as a reminder that the law isn't always equipped to handle matters of the supernatural, especially when it comes to settling scores with the dearly departed. There's no clear consensus on his final psychographed book, since he continued working until the end of his life. One of the most recent works attributed to him is Y la vida continua, and Life Goes On, psychographed from the spirit André Luiz. This book was published in Spanish in 2007, though it's unclear exactly when it was originally channeled. The story follows two characters who, after passing away, reunite in the spiritual world and discover the deep ties between them, offering a comforting vision of life after death. Javier Antonio left behind several unpublished books, which were released after his death in 1992. Even after his passing, new works attributed to him have continued to be published. However, there is one book he wrote that was never released. To this day, it is kept inside of a locked safe. The only person who knows the combination to this lock is Javier's son, Luis. He has sworn to never release this book. Those close to Luis have said that he believes this book is cursed and that anyone who reads it might go mad. He believes it was this book that caused the death of his father. For the details of his father's experience while writing the book can only be explained by the presence of something from another world, a world below ours. Javier has never strayed from the voices inside his head. Quite the opposite. He has always written his books by expanding his mind, letting the energy around him feed his creative appetite, rather than suppress it. This was no different. His wife had left for the weekend, leaving the house to just Javier and his young son, Luis. Luis could not have been more than 3 or 4 at the time, a very shy, sweet child. He would play in the living room or in the backyard while his father wrote, which was most of the day. They would reconvene for meals, and then in the evening they would play games or read a story. Not one of Javier's stories. Those were far too scary for Luis, who would wince easily. The day that Javier began to write his new story, the weather outside was beautiful. Luis was outside in the yard as soon as he woke up, playing with his stuffed animals. Javier could see him from his office window, located on the 2nd floor. He had his cup of coffee and an infinite runway of imagination to get this tale of terror off the ground. This was day 1, which meant he only had a pen and a tiny notepad. He had a rule on day 1: don't leave until the notepad is full. As soon as his hand gripped the pen given to him by his wife on his 30th birthday, he noticed that his room had turned dark. He looked outside to see that the skies had grown gray. Luis was still playing outside, humming something to himself as his fire truck rammed into the side of his army tank. 2 recent gifts given to him by his father after the success of his most recent book. The gray clouds seemed to dim towards dark abruptly. Javier stood up to get a better look of the landscape, which he had found so comfortable for so long. This ideal countryside home with neighbors that were few and far between, just as Javier preferred it. Rain was imminent. He told his son this, warning him to get inside once he felt the first drop. When Luis stood, Javier noticed immediately that something was different. Maybe it was just the angle. Maybe it was the way his son lurched his back as he stood. But his son was taller. Not much. Even from the second-floor window it seemed obvious. A father knows. The most subtle difference in a child will stand out in the eyes of a parent. Luis closed his eyes, stuck his hands out, and flipped his palms up into the sky, waiting to feel that first raindrop. Sure, it's possible that his son grew behind Javier's eyes. During the week, it was his wife who spent the majority of her time watching over the child, as Javier wrote. But the wife was visiting her mother, and now everything seemed to be a little crisper. What didn't seem possible was the color of that first raindrop. Red. Luis's hands looked as if they had been dipped in ketchup. He opened his mouth to taste the rain as it dripped off his tongue. Javier perched his head out of the window and waved both arms. His yell seemed to fall on deaf ears. He raised the timbre of his voice past any known decibel level and instructed his son to get inside, now. When Luis finally opened his eyes and tilted his neck forward, No, this could not be possible. He had grown.
Are you ready to finally make that dream a reality? Maybe it's updating your kitchen, paying down high-interest credit cards, or covering tuition. Your home is more than where you live. It's also your most powerful asset. At Unlock, we make it simple to turn equity into options. With a home equity agreement, you can access cash today without taking on monthly payments. Imagine the freedom to invest in your home, reduce financial stress, or finally start that big project you've been putting off. It's your home. It's your future. Unlock it today. Visit unlock.com to learn more about a home equity agreement. That's unlock.com to learn more.
Terms and conditions apply. Not all homeowners will qualify. Not available in all states. Actor Portrayal. Home equity agreements are offered by Unlock Home Equity Solutions, Inc. In certain states, NMLS number 2657081. Visit www.consumeraccess.org for more info.
The rationale seemed simple enough. Javier was tired. Javier was on the second floor. Javier was too focused on his writing. Javier had not spent enough time with his only child recently. Those were the simple reasons to explain why his son seemed to be growing before his very eyes. He shut the window. As he did, he could hear the pane begin to crack. It was as if the red rain was slicing against the glass. Mammoth nails against a chalkboard. Javier continued walking out of his office and then down the stairs. The time was not even noon, and yet the inside of his house looked to be past midnight. The eye of this storm seemed to be squinting at his house, his family. He stubbed his toe against the side of a couch as he rounded the corner, heading towards the back door to get out into the yard. Luis was gone, yet Javier could still hear him. The humming from his son's lips. It was as if they were circling in the wind above him. The clouds had crept into a malignant black. His mind flashed to one of his favorite books, the one that made him want to write scary stories, Moby Dick. Even all these years later, he can still see it. That passage.
As Ahab looks into the whale's eye, he was disturbed by its impenetrability. There is no recognition, no response, only a vast, blank consciousness that offers no reflection of Ahab's fury or humanity. In that moment, Ahab feels a kind of existential terror, the horror of confronting something truly beyond human understanding, something that sees but does not care, that exists beyond morality or malice.
That was how Javier felt looking into the eye of the storm. And then everything went quiet. He'd read about this in books, that moment of silence before destruction began. He screamed, but he didn't hear it. Even his own scream fell on deaf ears, and then he heard another scream. It was horrific, as if the screams of 1,000 children had been chopped up and shot out of a cannon. He fell to his knees and watched all of the glass on his house shatter simultaneously. He felt the many daggers of rain piercing his skin, his red skin. He was now drenched in blood. He stood and ran to the inside of his house. The raindrops sounded like gunfire. His house had been transported into the epicenter of a war zone, running from room to room, desperate to make sure his son was safe. He found him lying on the living room floor, drawing in his coloring book. Javier knelt down and grabbed his son's back, asking him if he was okay. When his son turned around, his face belonged to someone else. He had seen this face before. This older, weathered, sunken face. It was so familiar. Javier sprung up to his feet and backed against the wall as this thing in his son's body, with the face of another man, smiled at him. It spoke.
"What is it, Daddy?"
The voice belonged to his son. Javier had always been a deeply spiritual man. He began to cross his chest, whispering a prayer taught to him by his grandmother when he was the age of his son. It was during his own childhood, speaking with his grandmother, that he began to believe that when people die, it does not mean that they pass on to another realm. She said that sometimes a soul will become trapped in this world, caught between heaven and hell. His son stood up. He had grown again, his skin hanging down off of his elbows. Not only was he getting bigger, he was becoming older. Time seemed to be ripping apart his only child from the inside.
"What is it, Daddy?"
The angelic timbre of his son's voice was the only thing remaining consistent. The gunfire of the raindrops above him were pummeling his roof. There were now leaks in the corner of every wall. Javier's eyes began to expand as he saw that behind his son, or whatever had taken hold of his son's body, was a rising tide. The rain was so powerful and constant that it looked as if his house was slowly being swallowed whole by the hurricane. There had been no warning of this. Living a remote life off the grid had its many advantages, but it also had its disadvantages. Among them was not knowing of an impending storm. He grabbed his son's hand. It felt rough, like sandpaper. He led him up the stairs towards his office. As they sprinted, he could watch in real time the rising tide sliding up what used to be his windows, but had now turned into shattered glass. Rain was flooding inside from every angle. The home he had built on the success of his books was being submerged by water that was black as the night was long. They got inside Javier's office, and he slammed the door behind them, locking it tight, and then sliding a nearby dresser to block the entrance. The leaks had turned to streams. He was now drenched in the raindrops of blood as they spewed down from above. How was this possible? How was any of this possible?
What is it, Daddy?
He turned to his son standing by the window, the very same window he had been writing from earlier that morning, the window he had gazed out of so many times over the past decade as he turned the blank page into an entryway for others to see the world as he did. His writings were a connective tissue that could stretch across time. It was only in that moment, as the water began to pour in from the second-story window, that he recognized his son's face. Humberto de Cortez, the man whom he had cited as a spiritual influence, whose wife had taken him to court. His son now had the face of Humberto.
What is it, Daddy?
The rain stopped, yet the water continued to rise. Beyond the figure that was now Humberto was an ocean of darkness. His house had become submerged into the bottom of an ocean. Floating by the window were faces of all the spirits whom Javier had cited as inspirations, figures from the past who never received any sort of profit for Javier's work. Figures who went to their graves having not been rewarded for their efforts while still alive. Javier remembered the look that Humberto's wife had given him in court that day, the way the room seemed to go silent as she whispered something into his ear.
Alma errante que en la sombra gimes, atiende mi voz y cruza el umbral. Te llamo con sangre, te ofrezco mi aliento. Despierta del olvido y camina hacia mí.
Wandering soul who weeps in the shadows, hear my voice and cross the threshold. I call you with blood, I offer my breath. Awaken from forgetfulness and walk toward me. Luis found his father sleeping, or so that's what he thought. When the neighbors came over to check on him, after Luis told them that his father was not moving, he told them he just thought that his father was taking a nap. He had been playing in the yard and had not heard from his daddy in some time. So he ran all the way up to the second floor, knocked on his office door, and called for him. Many times. It was when his father did not move that he ran to his neighbor's house and told them something was wrong. To this day, Luis cannot understand why he has these dreams, dreams of waves, waves the size of skyscrapers, that move towards him slowly, black as the night is long. He uses these dreams as inspirations for his paintings, for which he has made a considerable amount of money. Recently, he has thought of painting his father and giving this to his mother as a gift. It was on the first birthday of his son that he began to paint. It was obvious what the painting would show. His father at his desk with a pen in his hand. Many people would no doubt pay good money for this work of art. But he did not want a profit. He wanted his mother to have a piece of her father to keep her company as she drifted into her advancing age. To his surprise, she rejected this gift, calling it a curse. His mother told him to get rid of this painting, that his father had become filled with lost souls. They had been ripping out his insides. That is why he died so young. Luis did not believe this. He never believed any of the foolish things his father told him as a child. He made a vow to speak in truth only. Faith had no place at his table. He had two options: bring his painting home and hang it up, or sell it to a fan, of which there were many. His wife had told him that their home could use some repairs. Since he did not believe in spirits, what harm could come from selling the painting to an adoring fan? He sold it to the highest bidder, who told him that he would always cherish it. It was the morning after the exchange. Luis was painting, up on the second floor. There was something so familiar in the air. It was beyond déjà vu. He looked out the window and could see his son playing in the grass. Luis couldn't help but appreciate the influence that his father had become on his own creativity. With every stroke of his brush, his father's blood would course through his veins. The connective tissue of his work was so heavily rooted in his family tree. Inside a safe that resides in his attic is his father's final book, the one that had filled his notebook when his son found him that morning, alone. He had died inside one of his stories. Luis has never read the words inside, nor does he ever plan to. To this day, he is the only one who even knows it exists, except for his father, who now resides 6 feet underground. As Luis stared down at his son, he couldn't help but wonder. His son had the eyes of his grandfather.
Sitting by the window, watching the rain fall slow, with every drop a memory of us dancing in the dark. But now the shadows linger and I'm left here with my heart. 'Cause I'm a little bit broken, little bit lost, and I don't know how to move on. You don't wanna be like me, this ache, it's so deep, always haunted by what was. Searching for the sunlight, but the clouds just don't clear. I've been wandering these streets, trying to find you somewhere. With every laugh a heartache, and I'm still calling your name, just to whisper in the night, hoping it'll ease the pain. 'Cause I'm a little bit broken, little bit lost, and I don't know how to move on. You don't wanna be like me, this ache, it's so deep, always haunted by what was. Wish we could turn back time to the moments before, but now I'm left here dreaming of the life we had before. 'Cause I'm a little bit broken, little bit lost, and I don't know how to move on. You don't wanna be like me, this ache, it's so deep, always haunted by what was.
Are high-interest credit cards or personal loans weighing you down? Unlock gives homeowners a smarter option. With a home equity agreement, you can tap into your home's equity for cash today. There are no monthly payments. Here's how it works. Unlock provides funds upfront and in exchange shares in a portion of your home's future value. That means you keep control with the flexibility to use your equity your way. pay off bills, invest in home improvements, or set aside savings for peace of mind. For thousands of homeowners, Unlock has been the key to moving forward without the pressure of another payment. Put your equity to work for you. Visit unlock.com to learn more about a home equity agreement. That's unlock.com to learn more.
Terms and conditions apply. Not all homeowners will qualify. Not available in all states. Actor Portrayal. Home equity agreements are offered by Unlock Home Equity Solutions, Inc. In certain states, NMLS number 2657081. Visit www.consumeraccess.org for more info.